Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. DealQuest community, listen, in this solo cast this week, anybody who's listened to the show for any period of time knows that the fundamental premise of the show is that there's a deal for that, meaning that, any kind of business frustration, issue, or challenge, there's all kinds of deals you can do. And that, M&A, mergers, acquisitions, and capital raising, investment deals are two of the biggest types of deals. Those aren't the only deals. And I've said it over and over again, licensing, joint ventures, strategic alliances. Well, I want to go further down that rabbit hole and really give you in this solo cast just an even more detailed look on all, not even all, but like a chunk more or variations of that theme and the deals that you can do. Because, I find that no matter how many entrepreneurs I talk to, and I talk to a lot and I give talks or whatever, that they either don't have the deal maker mindset, or if they do, it's limited. And of course, there's much more information out there on certain types of deals than others. And however, these other types of deals that are less talked about, less known, less done, are often the ones that apply to a broader range of companies, right? Only so many companies are fundable. We've talked about that before. In fact, most companies are not really fundable with any kind of professional capital. And a lot of companies aren't ripe for sale and maybe are not in a position to do significant M&A. So I want to dig into this a little, or maybe a lot deeper, although even this won't cover it all. So let's talk about categories, right? So let's talk about, let's say, strategic partnerships and alliances. I've given that category before, and I've mentioned different things. So you have joint ventures. So what is a joint venture? Well, you can have a joint venture that is a contractual joint venture, right? And you can have a joint venture that's an entity joint venture where you own it together. And basically, the the entity joint venture is shared ownership of an entity for a specific project or purpose. Some key applications of that are to get into market entry, meaning like, oh, wait, you have access to this market. I have a different product or service I can sell into that market. Let's combine that. By the way, that could be done as a sales rep agreement, as a distribution agreement, as a commission agreement, but it also could be done as a shared ownership joint venture. Technology development, right? Somebody has the ability to market technology, somebody can produce it, or somebody can produce the technology, and someone else can make it into a product and embed it or use it or create a product from it that can be used. And then, sometimes there's a risk-sharing element of that, right? Where you say, hey, we're going to de-risk it because these people have this expertise in this, and we have this expertise in other things. You've got examples, Sony Ericsson, early Hulu, and then some of the critical success factors in these, and this is true for a lot of deals: aligned objectives, clear governance, exit provisions. Listen, you're coming together. It's almost like it's a business partnership, right? You're coming together. So if you don't have a shared vision in the direction it's going to go in terms of the clear governance, you're talking about how are decisions are made, right? Who has control of which type of decisions, or how is it voted? And the other thing I would say is how money flows, not only out, but also in, if there's investment that needs to do, and what kind of resources, whether that's labor, people, tech, whatever that the companies are required to put in. So those are all some of the factors. Then you have strategic partnerships, which might be, you can call that a non-entity or non-equity, a joint venture sometimes. So sometimes they only use joint venture for the entity type. But whatever you call it, a strategic partnership would be more of a contractual collaboration, marketing partnerships, technology integration partnerships, distribution partnerships, channel agreements, reseller relationships, right? Some of those things I started to go into. Co-development agreements where you share R&D and product development. One case study on that is the Microsoft and SAP partnership evolution. And I'm not going to go down on any of the specific examples, but you can So Google and look up some of those if you want to see some of these examples I'm giving. And then there's another category is intellectual property and technology deals. So what are we talking about there? Well, you've heard me talk about licensing, right? So there's technology licensing, right? Patent portfolios, software licensing, trademark licensing. So on the technology licensing side, it's like patents and software mostly. The brand licensing side is right, trademarks, maybe merchandising rights you can do. Content licensing, media rights, publishing agreements, right? People can license out training programs, other types of content. And we talked about that for speakers and things like that, but there are also operating companies that have certain types of content that they use for whether it's training, whether it's other things that might be able to be licensed. And then, there's royalty structures, there's fixed fee, there's minimums in these deals, there's certain revenue sharing models. So those are all factors that come around licensing agreements sometimes. And then technology transfer agreements, right? This often comes up with university industry partnerships. A lot of research is done in universities, and then universities aren't the ones who are going to commercialize that, right? There are often educational organization, and industry business partnerships where there is an arrangement where there's some sort of share or license or fee, or occasionally they can sell the technology. But a lot of times the inventors, the professors, the universities want some sort of ongoing, share of that commercialization. There's cross-licensing arrangements, and there's something called know-how agreements, right? Where there's certain trade secrets, manufacturing processes. What makes these a little different is that you can license a patent, and the patent is actual filed IP. Sometimes it doesn't make sense and it's riskier to do a patent because it discloses certain things. And so you might have a trade secret that's not a registered thing or some sort of secret process, and you can still do a deal where you're licensing or sharing or allowing another company to use that know-how, those trade secrets, that in a way that, is mutually beneficial. Then there's a whole category of, let's say, operational supply chain deals, right? So outsourcing agreements, right? You have business process outsourcing for finance, for HR, for customer service. You have manufacturing partnerships where you do contract manufacturing or private labeling, right? Somebody produced the goods for you, you put your brand on it. I talked about, we had an episode recently where we talked a little bit about white labeling, right? White labeling is similar in that that could be like a service, right? Where, hey, we provide this behind the scenes, but you can put your name on it. So private labeling is similar to that, but it's like for good, an actual physical product or good. IT outsourcing, I'm looking at a list that, I did some research. I mean, for me, that is, if you're just hiring somebody, that's not really a deal for me, but you can do certain partnerships, with IT providers and IT where maybe they're not just a fee for service, but they're taking a piece of the action, right? And then supply chain and distribution agreements, right, is another thing within that supply chain. Like maybe somebody has exclusive distribution rights by geography or by industry or by company or by whatever it is. And then franchises, right? We've talked about franchises. There's procurement partnerships where groups of companies get together that are procuring similar goods. Sometimes they can even be competitors, but to be able to get better pricing with the suppliers, they come together sort of in a buying group, right? So that's something that can be done. All right. And then we've got obviously asset deals, which could be just selling full companies on an asset basis, which is the way most M&A deals are structured. But it could also be individual asset sales, right? Selling off certain equipment or facilities or a subsidiary, an IP portfolio, sale leaseback arrangements, right? Where companies sell, whether it's real estate or other assets, and then they lease them back because they don't want to have them on their balance sheet, right? So, and then there's obviously distressed asset sales, right? That could be either through bankruptcy or it could be outside of bankruptcy. Those come up. I mean, we can spend a whole time on all the real estate transactions. We've had various types of real estate people on, whether that's real estate development deals, whether that's build-to-suit agreements, whether that's real estate joint ventures, whether that's sale leaseback structures like we talked about in terms of property, whether that's raising funds of capital for investment, right? A lot of the structures that we talk about on the corporate side can also be done on the real estate side. And sometimes there are obviously nuances to that, but fundamentally, those things are available often on real estate deals as well. There are financial restructuring deals, right? Debt restructuring, workout agreements, assignments for the benefit of creditors, right? You run into trouble, you may be assigning certain assets to that. Now, people don't think about those as deals because most of the time we're trying to focus on the positive deals. But those are things that do happen when companies get in trouble. And sometimes, by the way, that's what helps them get out of trouble, right? They have certain valuable assets. They can assign those to the creditors. You can say, hey, here, take this, and then leave us alone and let us restart and operate the business and maybe get out of some of the debt we have with the legacy debt and give us a shot to go forward again, right? And sometimes the creditors will be willing to do those deals. Corporate reorgs, that's a whole other category. Spinoff transactions. We had somebody a while ago, I wish I remembered. I could shout them out, but I'm not remembering right now. But we talked a little bit about, he worked, on some spinoffs, right? So that's where bigger, you often hear with bigger companies, but it can be smaller, medium-sized companies where they divest certain divisions or subsidiaries. And this happens actually often, I don't know often, but at times in connection with an acquisition. Because sometimes the seller says, hey, I don't want to start splitting things off. If you want to buy it, buy the whole thing. And the buyer will buy the whole thing knowing that they only want 3 out of the 5 divisions of the company they're buying. And then they're going to spin off the other 2, right? And keep the ones they want and basically buy it all, but then sell off, let's say, 2 of the 5 divisions or product lines or whatever it is. And sometimes, by the way, a lot of times those are external, but sometimes you can have a management buyout, right? You can spin that off to existing management in those companies. And then there's some interesting emerging deals that are, happening now, whether it's in the digital economy transactions, data licensing stuff, platform partnerships for API integrations, market relationships, things like that, cryptocurrency and blockchain deals, token partnerships, things like that. I will tell you that is not, we are not deep into crypto and blockchain deals, but there are people who do those, and there are some very, specific things in those. And then there's ESG, right? Environmental and social, good driven partnerships. I know that's not politically in favor right now, but, whether that's carbon credit transactions or sustainability partnerships where people are collaborating to create, more green products, and certainly impact investing structures. There's still many folks out there that are impact investors and are maybe a little more patient capital or have impact related criteria when they decide to invest in companies. So those deals are interesting. And listen, a lot of these kinds of deals, listen, we can go on and on and on and on. And I guess, listen, where I want to come back to is the thing I always say is that, and it's why I have this talk that's called There's a Deal for That, because any business problem, challenge, or frustration that you have can be solved through a deal. And you don't have to really even know what that deal is called or what it looks like, right? What I always say to clients is, listen, just tell me where you are, tell me what each party is bringing to the table, right? And then tell me where you want to get with it. And then I can give you some of the, the different options and structures and ways to do it and tell you whether we're going to do it as a joint venture or a strategic alliance, or maybe it's a license deal or a subcontract deal or a joint marketing arrangement or a joint distribution arrangement or whatever it is, right? So that's the big message here. And I just wanted to delve into a little more of some of these other types and examples of things, just again, to get listeners' brains moving. Maybe it'll, I've had this when I do this Deal for That talk, but sometimes, I have many people in the audience who get this sort of aha, like, wow, I hadn't thought about that. I say, who has access to the market you're trying to get into, or the client or the demographic or whatever? What kind of deal can you do with them? So I want you to start thinking about that, and maybe some of these different types of deals that I've mentioned have jogged your memory. Now, listen, in any of these types of deals, there are important factors to think about, whether that's risk allocation, right? Indemnifications, who's responsible for what, who takes the liability risk on what, how governance, how are decisions made, how do you resolve disputes, performance metrics, how do we know that we're successful, and what are we tracking, and what does that trigger in terms of maybe rights or economic benefits in the deal, exit provisions, right? So the prenup, what if we split up? How is that going to be handled? How do we unwind? There's different types of due diligence you want to be doing on every one of these deals: financial, legal, operational, cultural, you name it. It applies not only to M&A and capital raising deals, but if you're getting into a business partnership, joint venture, strategic alliance, any of these deals we talked about, right? You're going to want to do due diligence on your potential deal partners. That's absolutely crucial. And listen, there's a lot of case studies out there. Harvard, Wharton, Stanford do a lot of these where if you really want to delve into this stuff and see how they've analyzed some of these kinds of deals in the past and what's worked and what not, and really get educated up on it, those are good sources. Industry trade publications cover them. Company annual reports and investor presentations are often very interesting. And so, listen, I think I'm fascinated. Listen, do we do more M&A than anything else in my firm? Yes. Right? Are capital raising and investment deals a huge part of the deals sector? Yes. In some ways, though, I'm excited when we do these other deals that are less done, when we do a license deal, a white label deal, or a joint venture, because, they're in some ways, can be more creative and interesting, or at least newer. And also, again, they're available to a lot more companies than certainly capital raising is, and even M&A is. So hopefully this jogs some thoughts for you and your business. And obviously, and listen, if you have any questions, you want to, brainstorm deals that can help you grow your business, feel free to reach out. Corey Kupfer signing off on this solo cast. Look out next week for a great guest interview.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.